Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of the So Below Average podcast, the terrible show for people with terrible taste. And today, we are reviewing the movie Toxic Shark, directed by Cole Sharpe. But before we get into all that, I want to talk a little bit about me and the podcast and where this idea came from. And I also want to talk a little bit about where this is going, or at least where I hope it's going. You never know, you know? So, let's start out. You know what? Let's do one of those stupid getting to know you games that we play in, the first day of college class or an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, you know? Tell us your first name and why you're here. Oh, don't worry about it, guys. I'll go first. My first name is Allison, and I'm here because I'm bored. Like, I eat Cheerios one by one to kill the time bored. I watch paint dry for a living bored. I recently graduated from college, and I live with my parents, and so I spend a lot of time alone in the basement and talking to myself instead of talking to other people. So here I am. I decided to put some of my thoughts on the internet and to see how people respond to them. And also to help get my voice heard by some people who I love who can't always be by me. Hi, Katie. And that's a huge part of this, as well as it's connecting with people outside of where I am. That's, kind of why I'm here, but it's not why the podcast itself exists. This podcast has a very specific story. So last month, this is January of 2020, for those who might be listening much later. In December of 2019, my brother came home from college, and we began having terrible movie marathon nights. Which is something we like to do together. But in this particular case, it was something that I happened to find particular enjoyment in. The year before, he had gotten me this Mega Shark 8 movie compilation for Christmas. And so this Christmas, we decided to look into it, and I found that I have quite a lot to say about some of these movies that we watched. Some more of them will be covered. This one came off of that DVD. I thought it was just a natural place to start with where it began. And then later on we will talk about some of the other ones, but I'm gonna make sure that not all of them come from this DVD compilation. I do want to do other creature features as well. So basically, this podcast is my tribute to the truly awful and terrible content that modern media provides for us. When we have so much incredible content coming out every single day, you roll with the punches. With every bit of good, you get something bad. And with the quantity of fantastic media that's coming out these days, you gotta roll with some of the punches. And my personal love in life is to absorb these punches to these movies like a sponge. I love it. And I want to make sure, though, that my voice is not the only one heard about this. I want to pull reviews from places like IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes. I always want to make sure that I'm not just in an echo chamber. And I don't want to really review anything above a 5 or a 6. Out of 10 stars, I should say. Anything above that can kind of become... It can be debatable with the quality, and so the 5 or the 6 mark, the 5-6 mark, the halfway point, is kind of where things can get a little, what's the word? It can get a little controversial, I suppose. Some people love this new Star Wars movie that just came out, but most people fucking hate it. It really all depends. And like with Rotten Tomatoes score, I'm not going off of the critic score, I'm going off of the audience score, which is what I think actually matters. If people like it, it's a good movie. If people fucking hate it and loathe it and can't stand to ever watch it again, it is not. But either way, I don't want to get into stuff that's too close to that line, just because some people are gonna get on your ass for liking something that they hate. or not liking something that they love and shitting on something that they love, and I just don't feel like that's a good place to go with it. I'm here to shit on things that are already shitty, and people know that they're shitty. I do want to branch out on occasion, however. I don't want to make this completely, oh, I'm just gonna shit on movies all the time. I think on rare occasions, like my birthday or Christmas or stuff like that, I'm gonna review things that are actually good. I'm gonna talk about things that I love, and some things that you need to talk about the good parts about in order to get to the terrible parts. Like the Jaws franchise, for example. Jaws 1 and 2 are fabulous, excellent movies, great examples of horror cinema, and then 3 and 4 are not. Jaws 3 is actually one of my favorite movies because it's so terrible and cheesy and jaunting, but Jaws 4 is completely unwatchable. But you kind of have to know what has happened prior in order to really understand what makes these movies so terrible in comparison. So that's where I'll kind of be branching out. And I'm not only doing movies, I'm also doing books, because that's where my loyalty really is. So I really don't want to make too many hard rules about this podcast. I'm going to keep it kind of loosey-goosey, and I hope you guys kind of understand that. This is just where I think that this should go. But let's see if it actually goes this way. I doubt it will ever go any consistent way. Just because that's not how life works sometimes. So I just want to give you a quick disclaimer. I did not go to school for film. I went to school for English, which you can almost make less money at. I don't have any experience as a reviewer, and I clearly have the most horrific taste known to man. I'm the easiest person in the world to get a chuckle out of, but I do have quite a bit of experience in literary critique, and I'm well versed in criticism from my English background. Frankly, though, I just enjoy ripping things apart with the literary logic, the narrative logic that I've learned over so many years, but please give me a pass if I don't go too in-depth specific on the film aspect, because I don't know the film aspect. This is not my forte all the time. What is my forte is taking apart the narrative bit by bit, and the character development and things like that. That is where my strengths come in. So with that note, I feel like we should finally get into what is really going on here. So, like I mentioned earlier, we are reviewing the film Toxic Shark, directed by Cole Sharpe, which came out in August of 2017 on the Sci-Fi Movie Channel. So let's start out with kind of where this movie came from. The movie, like I mentioned, is directed by Cole Sharpe, and this is his only directing experience that we know of. He hasn't done anything else in the 3 years since the movie came out, which I think probably means he realized that directing probably was not for him. But he probably means he wasn't on board with directing any further, which I think in this case could probably be a good thing. It was written by Ashley O'Neil, who has worked in other projects in the Hollywood movie industry, including the movie I Spit on Your Grave, which premiered in 2010 and has a solid 6.3 on IMDb, and a whopping 47% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, which I was actually quite surprised with. So this is one movie that will not be getting covered because of the 6.3 out of 10 scale. But she's also worked on another interesting creature feature that I will have to cover later, which is called Lavalantula, which has a 4.6 out of 10 on IMDb and a 32% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. Oh dear. Let me know if and when you'd love me to cover that. I'm totally into the whole premise of this movie, which, yes, is about a tarantula that can spit lava. Either way, Ashley has some previous writing experience here, although in certain places, which I will get into, you can't really tell. So the cast of the movie includes many smaller actors, including Cabby Borders and Bryce Durfee, who played the two main characters, Sam and Eden. Cabby Borders has gone on to do a few more professional films since this one, including the Motley Crue biopic, The Dirt, and the McDonald's movie, The Founder, although I think that was actually before this movie. She did not have a particularly large part in either of those movies, but she does actually do some decent acting in this one. Bryce Durfee continues to work, but generally his parts are limited to small bit parts and sitcoms and stuff like that. The particular one that people probably recognize is Last Man Standing, starring Tim Allen. He is also doing a new creature feature in the next year. It should come out this summer, and it is called Crabs. It looks about as interesting as Lavalantula, honestly. And the premise is centered on a set of mutated killer horseshoe crabs, which could be quite interesting, and I might have to cover that this summer, just for kicks, honestly. Debatably, there are two more famous members of this cast. Christina Masterson, who is known for playing the Pink Power Ranger in Power Rangers Megaforce, and for playing Grace in the critically lauded but audience-hated movie Starfish in 2019, plays Audra, who is Eden's best friend. And then you have Eric Edibari, who was raised in show business and attended Francis Ford Coppola's Magnet School in Hollywood. He's particularly known for his role in the TNT show Witchblade, which I have never seen, but it has decent reviews, so you never know. He's also done some modeling for expensive clothing companies like Armani and Versace, but apparently nothing has ever really taken off for him, unfortunately, which is kind of a shame because he is kind of one of the highlights of this movie. Because he's kind of hilariously stupid in places. You'll hear why in a second. Also, it's apparently very important that he owns a Rottweiler named Brando. In fact, it's so important that it's mentioned twice on his IMDb page, and, I got kind of a deranged chuckle out of that, just because it's like, dude, if you're gonna mention your dog twice like that, put the dog on your page. Just put your dog on your page. I want to see photos of a cute dog. Come on. Don't we all? I suppose we should probably move on. But either way, Eric Edibari, please put the photos of Brando on your profile if you're gonna talk about the dog. The movie itself was filmed in Puerto Rico, which seems to be kind of rare for a lot of these creature feature movies. A lot of them are shot in overseas places like Bulgaria, where it's easier to obtain permits for movie stunts and special effects like explosions and helicopter crashes and that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, there's not much more to say about production, besides that principal filming began in February of 2017 and the movie premiered in August. So, with that in mind, you gotta remember that a lot of films have a 3-year turnaround time. You go from casting 1 year to the next year doing all principal filming, and then the next year is completely post-production. You have a lot of elements that come in each of the 3 stages. In this case, it appears that the writing probably took them 2-3 months, and then principal filming began in February of 2017, and then post-production took all of 6 months, which for something like Star Wars or Star Trek or anything like that, The Witcher, which came out recently, the post-productions can take a year simply because of the special effects involved and the time constraints. So this movie clearly had a very short turnaround time, which is probably why some of the elements of it are so bad. Hi guys, Allison here. I just wanted to say a quick I'm sorry for the choppiness of the audio. You never realize how many times you say until you have to edit them all out. This is also a good time to give a warning to those who would like to see Toxic Shark. There are spoilers in the rest of the episode. This is also a good opportunity to issue a warning to any of you who are sensitive to violence, sex and sexuality, mentions of gore, unhealthy relationships, or anything related to those topics. Viewer discretion is advised. Thank you. I'll see you there. Okay guys, I'm gonna go into the plot of Toxic Shark, so you guys have to strap in here with me for a minute. A lot happens in the hour and 27 minutes of this film's runtime, but very little of it makes sense in context because some of the decision making is a little indescribable. So I feel like some form of explanation is kind of required here. So, in the opening of the film, tourists Maggie and Vince are four-wheeling along a beach on an island off the coast of Puerto Rico. Maggie ends her relationship with Vince, who turns out to be her sister's boyfriend, Classy. Before they can officially end things, Vince accidentally crashes the four-wheeler into the ocean, and both he and Maggie are devoured by the mutant killer Toxic Shark. Oh, just the memory of this scene brings back some unfortunate memory. Soon after the devouring of Maggie and Vince, Sam, our male lead, arrives on the island to be part of a sexy singles fitness retreat. Flanked by his two friends, the enthusiastic, sex-crazed phone company employee Zane and the meathead jock Ryan. Sam is apprehensive about the trip, having recently ended things with his longtime girlfriend, Eden. On the other side of the island, Eden herself and two friends of hers arrive, the sexy Gabriella and the subdued, sweet Audra, played by Christina Masterson. Eden is also apprehensive about this trip for the same reason as Sam, that she has just gotten out of a very long-term relationship and doesn't know what she's ready for. Meanwhile, Reese, the owner of the Bodies by Reese resort that is hosting this sexy singles retreat, is arguing with an agent of the EPA, or the Environmental Protection Agency, for those of you who don't know your acronyms. The EPA man makes it very clear that the water surrounding the island is unsafe and makes sure to tell Reese to test the water every morning. Reese does not take this advice to heart and continues to run the resort very badly. And he sends out his chef to fish enough food for 40 people in the toxic water. Great idea. Speaking of that chef, the resort chef Damiano and his assistant Gregory fish for the resort's food with very limited results. It seems the fish have recently disappeared. Then the shark appears and leaks over a series of rock formations, devouring both of them, despite the fact that they're only standing in about 5 feet of water. I need to get more objective. After getting a drink at the tiki bar, Sam quite literally crashes into Eden, who is furious that Sam is also on this retreat. Their friends convince them both to stay and have a good time, though neither of them are happy about having to stay in close proximity. While she's away with Gabriella and Audra, Eden discusses a bracelet she has with her friends, revealing that she is afraid of sharks and that the magnetized bracelet she has on will help keep her safe from them. After the awkwardness between Sam and Eden, Jesse, who is the medic at the island, goes to try to fix the boat on Reese's orders, because that makes so much sense. He has a very brief encounter with a shark, which bumps into the boat, and then he very quickly decides to get out of the boat and head back to work, which is, I think, the smartest decision I've ever seen in a horror movie. Then Gabriella, the sexy friend of Eden, goes out to take a swim and meet some hot guys, but then is quickly dragged back to shore by some of said hot men when something brushes up against her, which causes a large abrasion across her leg. She's swiftly taken to Jesse's medical station, where she is patched up and given the all clear. Meanwhile, another employee named Gwen is riding down the beach on horseback when her mare stops abruptly, refusing to go any further. When repeated attempts to calm the horse down are unsuccessful, the shark leaps out of the water and pulls Gwen off of her horse, killing and eating her. After Gabriella decides that she wants to leave the medical center, Jesse and another employee named Aaron, who is Reese's second in command, have a conversation about how many employees are suddenly disappearing after the disappearance of both Damiano, Gregory, and Gwen all at once. And they believe that the crew members are staging a walkout in response to Reese's abusive business practices. Jesse also mentions his brief encounter with the shark in the water, but Aaron brushes that off. After missing out on beach yoga because of Gabriella's injury, Eden, Audra, and Sam all participate in a high-intensity workout where they have to work with randomly selected partners. Sam and Eden are placed together, and despite the very real sexual tension between them, they argue, and both of them leave the activity. In the meantime, Gabriella decides to return to her cabin because she's not feeling the greatest. The entire beach yoga classes are all killed after cooling off in the ocean, so it's probably good that they missed beach yoga. And Jesse, the medic, and two other employees named Hayden and Liam go looking for Gwen, but they only find a water testing kit left behind by Reese, that was given to him by the Environmental Protection Agent. And then they find that the phone cable that connects the island to the rest of the known world has been cut, which leaves them with no communication with the mainland. On the same beach, they find Damiano's severed arm, which apparently was left over from the shark attack. Just as they inform Reese that something bad is happening and that there is probably a shark out in the water, the shark devours another two guests who are out surfing. Gabriella collapses before she can return to her cabin and is taken back to medical, exhibiting signs of infection and shock, going into both a confused state and convulsions. Reese continues to be a dick and refuses to call her a helicopter to airlift her to a hospital, but he does allow Aaron and Jesse to get everyone out of the water before something bad happens. Even though something bad has already happened, because like I mentioned, 2 surfers just got murdered by the shark. While they are figuring out how to get everyone out of the water, Sam, Audra, Ryan, Zane, and Eden are all playing tug-of-war in the water. While Jesse and Aaron are trying to get people out, the toxic shark attacks, killing Ryan and half a dozen other tourists. Eden, seeing the shark spew toxic chemicals from some sort of spout or blowhole on his head, calls it a toxic shark, and there's the movie right there. Reese decides to get the injured back to the mainland via boat, as Gabriella's condition has grown worse, and she has begun to speak in tongues and is becoming more and more aggressive as time goes on. Reese and Audra get onto the boat and begin helping Gabriella in when she goes feral, kind of, and her eyes turn red, and then she bites Jesse before falling into the water and getting eaten by the shark. You're going to hear that phrase a little bit, so remember that. Reese drives the boat a few hundred feet away, but then the engine stalls, and when he tries to get it going again, the shark attacks, eats Reese, and spews toxic sludge at the boat, which corrodes the engine and makes it explode. Audra, who is still on the boat, was stranded. She is injured in the explosion, but she survives, although she begins to exhibit the exact same symptoms as Gabriella, only much faster than Gabriella did because of the bite placement, because the bite is higher on her body than Gabriella's was. The other employees, Liam and Hayden, come up with a plan to get everyone off the island by repairing the corroded phone cable. Zane, who works for the phone company, is roped into this. And I say roped into this because this was very much not consensual. Liam and Hayden are both armed with harpoon guns to defend themselves, and meanwhile, Sam, Jesse, and Aaron go back to the boat that Jesse had previously tried to fix it because he has some experience patching boats. Jesse, from the bite that Gabriella gave him, begins to exhibit infection symptoms, but holds himself at bay for a while. Both teams leave their little base, which leave Eden alone with the increasingly more violent Audra. Liam, Hayden, and Zane attempt to fix the phone cable, but it is beyond repair, and then the shark appears and kills Liam, and Zane attempts to kill the shark himself with a harpoon, and just ends up shooting Hayden in the leg. Sam finds that the boat, which is relatively new, has a large hole in the hull, caused by something acidic eating through the fiberglass. Jesse at this point goes completely feral, attempting to kill both Aaron and Sam, who was able to knock him out. And then they take him back to the medical station only to find Eden and Audra both missing. Zane carries in Hayden, who receives medical attention for the harpoon in her leg. Eden finds the water testing kit in the medical center where their base is, and has left Audra ranting and raving from the infection to her own devices. Eventually, Audra succumbs to the infection and goes out seeking victims to turn into zombies. Eden tests the water where the shark was previously seen while Audra is doing this, and finds that it contains a higher than average amount of arsenic. She goes to investigate a piece of debris floating in the water and is attacked by the shark, but her magic magnet bracelet wards it off, and Sam drags her out of the water. After this, they settle their differences and appear to have made up, so yay! Yay for this toxic relationship. Sam and Eden head back to the medical station, where Eden tells them about her findings and that the shark is giving off high levels of arsenic, which is turning people into zombies when it gets into their bloodstream. They decide to continue fixing the boat and to find Audra and get her medical attention for her affliction. Zane and Sam fix the boat, but they are attacked by the shark. Zane gets knocked into the water and is bitten, but he survives. Eden and Aaron go looking for Audra, but get distracted looking for yoga magnets to repel the shark. After finding the magnets, they discover that Audra has turned the entire population of the islands into flesh-hungry, co-ed zombies. Well... Jesse, who is left in the medical center with Hayden, escapes from his bonds and tears Hayden's throat out. Then the shark continues to pursue Zane and Sam, who are in their speedboat. They blow out the engine trying to get away, and then the zombie co-eds chase Eden and Aaron into the beach, close to where Zane and Sam are drifting in. They decide to swim for the boat, and with the zombies continuing to give chase, the shark attacks the zombie horde, killing Audra and Jesse before turning its attention back to the boat. To warn off the shark, Eden throws some therapy magnets at it. These chase it off briefly, but not for long. Their boat floats just above the wreck of Reese's boat from earlier, and then the shark circles around, this time squirting toxic goo out of its blowhole at them, which corrodes the engine and starts it on fire. Because arsenic is flammable, Eden suggests trying to set the shark on fire with a flare gun from Reese's boat. Aaron and Zane agree to stay above the water, and Sam and Eden dive for the flares while wearing therapy magnets to ward off the shark. They quickly retrieve the flares, but Zane succumbs to the infection and attacks Aaron, who pushes him into the water. The shark eats Zane. Eden and Sam make it to the surface and back into the boat with the flares. Sam fires 2 shots at the shark and misses both times. The shark knocks Aaron out of the boat, and to protect himself and Eden, Sam throws all of the magnets into the shark's mouth. It shakes off this assault quite quickly and then throws itself onto the boat, smashing it into a million pieces. Sam and Eden barely make it out, and Aaron resurfaces with the last flare, despite us thinking that she was dead. Eden shoots the shark, and it explodes. They swim back to the mainland, and Sam and Aaron decide to give their relationship another shot. But however, when they look over at Aaron, they discover that she is now also infected. And that is where the movie cuts to black. Blank screen, we're done. Right on that cliffhanger. Okay, so this is the section that I would like to call the forgivable choices, the good things that this movie does. The forgivable choices. You can always find good things in a piece, no matter if it's completely unsalvageable or not. You can always find something decent to say. And this is my section of that. The first thing that the film gets right is its atmosphere. The setting and actors complement each other. It is, in fact, a gorgeous island in Puerto Rico, full of sexy co-eds, and this does its job quite well. It's a newer resort, and everything looks accordingly new and beautiful, and oftentimes the tension that the movie gives off because of the contrast of its beauty and also what's happening in it creates some really nice, beautiful tension, which I really enjoyed. There are a lot of gratuitous shots of Puerto Rico. Almost too many, to be honest. It was very clear that the filmmakers knew that the highlight of this film is the gorgeous ocean scenery. Sometimes it borders on too much, but I can't fault them for wanting to clean up the script with the visuals. It's very much the most forgiving part of the movie is how gorgeous the scenery is. I can't say that I hated every single character. While characters like Zane and Hayden drove me to the point of wanting to jump off a bridge, the comic relief characters of Ryan and Reese actually derived some deranged bits of laughter from me. I'm not sure if that was good for my health or not, but I did laugh. The line, "Is that a shirt or a sausage casing?" led me to similar hysterics. It was kind of hilarious. I did appreciate that this movie did do its best not to say that all sharks are bad, like most of the Jaws movies do. Rather than talking about great whites as a whole, they spend their time concerned with just one shark, not a population of them. However, their lack of respect towards the science of sharks does become a huge hiccup. I know that these movies are not supposed to be accurate, but this one has a particular disdain for the truth that I will have to explain later in the review. The film actually does explain how both threesomes ended up on the island at the same time, which I was not expecting them to do. Zane heard about it from one of Eden's women's health magazines that she left in Sam's bathroom after the breakup. At the very least, they actually establish why the mix-up occurred. There's also a lot of foreshadowing, which I would have appreciated far more if most of it mattered. But there is foreshadowing here. There is attempt at doing something really cool here. And I have to appreciate the effort that went in, even if it didn't pan out completely as well as I'm sure they hoped it would be. There was some really good bits of continuity. Damiano's severed arm is the one with his prominent chef tattoo across the knuckles. Whether or not anyone who has culinary training would ever be stupid enough to get the word chef tattooed across the knuckles is questionable, but at the very least, it was on the correct hand, and they showed the tattoo previously. I appreciated that. Decent work for the continuity guy. I do appreciate that the filmmakers were willing to not only branch out into a toxic kind of environment for a shark, but also to work in the zombie genre. You know, it's two very, very distinct elements, one of which is not done nearly as well as the other, but I do appreciate that they were willing to genre hop a little bit. It wasn't just a shark movie, it was a shark movie, and it was a zombie movie, and that makes a world of difference for me. Is it stupid? Yes. And is it also fun, and do I love it? Abso-fucking-lutely. I also want to talk about the camera work real quick. There are places where the camera work is genuinely competent. The part of the movie where Eden is trying to save Audra after she falls into the water with the shark is both well done and well acted. The slow motion camera work is really good. Another note, I can't really fault Cabby Border's acting in a lot of the movie, with the exception of maybe some of her catfights with Sam, just because a lot of the catfights with Sam seemed like they were very, very forced, and possibly because Cabby Borders and Bryce Durfee might work really, really well together. They might like each other a lot, and I can't blame them if that's why they had issues getting it to where it needed to be. The anti-shark magnets were used pretty consistently through the film, but are very underutilized in the climax. I'll get used to that in a minute. And do I have any more notes? Oh. Sam can't shoot, but Eden can. Hashtag feminism! Cool! I'm down with that. And there's a decent cliffhanger ending with Eden being infected. She could infect the entire population of Puerto Rico. I hope they make a sequel, honestly. This could be fun. This could be incredibly fun. Okay, though. This means with the end of my, what was decent notes, we have to talk about the absolutely unforgivable choices that were made. So this is a section that I would like to call the unforgivable choices.
This is unforgivable.
Okay. So, I know that these movies are bad, but I always feel compelled to talk about specifically what is bad about them, like I mentioned earlier. In this movie, chronology is not its friend, nor is plot continuity. First of all, the opening scene with the couple on the four-wheelers, Maggie and Vince, are definitely tourists. The four-wheelers were left behind on the beach at high tide when the shark attacked them. Why did no one go looking for them? Ever. Literally, they are never mentioned again. Her sister is still on the island, probably looking for her sister and boyfriend. Why are they still missing? I do not understand. It's just they forgot about them. This is a big one for me. I hate it when a shark film does this. The shark Rawrs. I hate it. I hate it when sharks roar. Mostly because sound waves do not travel very well underwater. Sharks do not have vocal cords. They cannot roar like a fucking dinosaur or like a fucking lion or a tiger or whatever vocal clip they put through. Sharks cannot roar, and it ruins any semblance of a decent tension for me because I laugh. This is unforgivable. While I'm at it, here's an overall comment on the shark effects altogether. The shark effects are terrible. But they at least went to the trouble of making a full CG shark instead of using footage from Shark Week's past like a lot of shark movies do. Okay, so the shark is pretty inconsistent with how it's shown. The shark definitely looks computer generated, but it's pretty inconsistently depicted. Sometimes the shark is shown with reddish caudal fins, and sometimes it's the same sickly green color that it always is. It's not the worst thing in the movie by far, but it is pretty off-putting. On that subject, the shark is inconsistent in and of itself in its abilities. When the EPA official drives away from the island, he is not attacked by the shark in any manner, neither is the very loud, slow kayaks of the female trio who kayak onto the island. Only the speedboats later in the film are ever attacked. And on top of that, the shark is shown numerous times to jump in very, very shallow water, and then it just doesn't do that later. I don't understand why, if the shark has the ability to leap out of the water to grab somebody, off of a horse that is riding on the beach, not in the water, on the beach. Doesn't the shark have the ability of grabbing somebody off of a dock? It's very confusing. It's very, very inconsistent. The toxic sludge that the shark spews, people like the chef and his assistant, look straight out of the Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Awards. It is very much just green slime. It would have been much better if they had used something a bit thinner and chunky. Probably something that looked a little bit more like acid. It would have been a little bit more believable. I believe that going the Exorcist route and using pea soup probably would have achieved the best result here. Yes, we would have known it's pea soup, but it's probably easier to get out of clothing than green dyed slime, you know what I mean? Speaking of the toxin, I don't understand why the movie is so obsessed with arsenic. Arsenic is not an acid. It would not burn holes into the hulls of boats. It is not enough to mutate anything or anyone either. If you get arsenic into your bloodstream, you do not become a zombie, you die. Also, confusion and convulsions, like I mentioned earlier in Gabriella, are symptoms of arsenic poisoning. But what is depicted in the film is not confusion, although you can debate convulsions. What is depicted in the film is incoherent babbling, not confusion. It is some form of psychosis caused by the high fever and rabies-like symptoms of this toxic shark bite. But anyway, I think we need to leave the toxin alone for a little bit because I'm getting a little heated. Okay, so let's talk about the gratuitous booty shots. I understand that they're necessary for this type of movie, but somehow even I, a straight woman who has never been attracted to breasts in my life, was distracted by Cabby Border's boobs. She's gorgeous, but the weird amount of lingering on the TNA was really distracting. The constant shirtlessness for the guys is a whole nother matter entirely. It gets to be too much when it's all you can see besides terrible CG and butts and thongs. It just gets very tiring. You know, I love washboard abs the same as the next girl, but go for a different shot, guys. So here's something a little bit more serious. Sam and Eden's relationship. Well, let's talk about this. For starters, clearly their relationship is unhealthy. They spit more venom at each other than the shark does. Like, seriously. I started to wonder at some point whether Ashley O'Neil had meant to portray them as a foil for the shark for how many words they spit at each other that are just vile. But then I remembered what kind of movie I was watching, and I kind of left it at that because they would not have had that much forethought into this. They're constantly fighting and being unkind to each other until the end of the movie where they suddenly just decide to try their relationship again because they make a good team. Okay. Just because you work well with someone in a stressful situation, it does not mean that you and that person are meant to be. Eden and Sam were fighting long before the movie started, and that was from when they were actively dating and not in a stressful situation. It worked for a partnership while you were in danger, but that does not necessarily mean it will work when you are at home. Completely different scenarios, and you've already been through that second half of the scenario. You already know that at home you are incompatible. It does not make sense to go back to working in a relationship where you both know that you cannot work in a domestic environment. Alright, okay. Here's some of the funnier stuff now. When Gabriella gets hurt in the water, Audra can't remember the name of the box jellyfish. I'm sorry. It is one of the easiest names in the world to remember. It's the box jellyfish. You see boxes every single day. She calls it a container fish. She calls it a container fish. I'm sorry, it's so stupid. I hope that was an ad-lib by Christina Masterson and not something that Ashley O'Neil actually wrote into this script. Okay. Hayden's character is very annoying, even though in reality she does very little. Her acting is far below the average Hollywood standard. It's downright cringy. Insert voice clip here.
Well, this isn't good.
Yeah. It's really that bad, and it carries that kind of standard throughout the film. I did not appreciate her acting. Gwen's death. We never saw Gwen before her death scene, so her attack comes completely out of nowhere, out of left field for those viewing it. It just comes out of nowhere. Also, the fact that the shark leaps out of the water to chow on her. Like I said earlier, she is not riding in the water. She is very much still up on the sand away from the tide. The water at that portion of the island is very clearly shallow, only a couple of feet deep. I'll get back to this later, but I must get this straight for people who don't know. Most shark attacks do happen in about 3 feet of water, and great whites have attacked people in that level of water. However, the flying shark attacks that great whites are known for and that are happening here require much, much deeper water, which allows the sharks to build up the speed to break the surface of the water. It takes a lot of energy for them. The whole point of this is that there's no way in hell that the great white could build up that much speed to grab her off of a horse, then land back in the water and swim away. It just is not possible, and for a shark of that size, it would beach itself before it could ever get her off the horse. However, I definitely laughed. It was just such a surreal moment, because how do you even explain that kind of a thing? How do you explain that? Okay, so the giant underwater phone cable is ripped from Jaws 2. It's just a straight up rip-off. It's not an homage. This is the first of several blatant Jaws rip-offs disguised as homages. The phone cable plays in very little to the plot. The most you can talk about it is that it means that their communication is cut off. Okay, the communication's cut off. First of all, the fact that you are on an island off of the coast of the mainland and you don't have a sat phone is incredibly reckless. In the case of a surprise, very, very quickly forming tropical storm, you should have a sat phone in case of emergencies. They do not. This is on them. Reese was very poorly prepared for any kind of evacuation necessary. And I blame not only him, but some of his staff for that, because Aaron and Jesse definitely could have known better and could have brought a sat phone. Okay, so the film also does very little to introduce you to the characters or to learn their names. Besides Sam and Eden, you really kind of have to search for the names of the other characters. I didn't get Hayden's name until just before she died. Most of my film notes list her as blonde, to be honest. Real quick, along with this, I want to note that literally every single character of color in the movie dies. I mean everyone. Zane is a black man. He gets killed in the last act. Liam and Gwen are both native Puerto Ricans. They both die. Everybody of color in the entire movie at some point gets killed by the shark. And I was kind of disappointed because the leads are very blonde, very pretty, and very white. I'm not going to get into that further. Do with that what you will. The zombie thing is very uneven. While it took Gabriella hours to go full feral zombie, it took Zane less than an hour despite being exposed in a similar part of his body to Gabriella. Audra takes less than an hour, but her bite is much closer to the brain, which is, how they explain away her turning as fast as she does. They also don't do enough with it, like I mentioned earlier. The zombies only really serve to get them into the water for the climax. They could have done so much more with this, making them this new menace, so you can't be on land and you can't be in water. What are you gonna do? The boat's not safe, the resort's not safe, everybody's a zombie, what are we gonna do? It would have made so much more tension if the zombies weren't there purely to scare Aaron and Eden into the water so that the shark can attack the zombies and kill a bunch of people while Eden and Aaron make it into the boat. It was very underutilized. I would have loved to see more of that. Also, this is my biggest point and my biggest complaint here. Eden saw Gabriella and Audra going feral and getting aggressive when the infection progressed enough. And in Gabriella's case, she did witness her biting. So what I don't understand is when she finds this water testing kit and decides to go out and play scientist and figure out that the water's got all sorts of arsenic in it, she leaves Audra alone. Audra is going feral. Audra is getting more and more aggressive by the moment. She leaves Audra there despite this and allows Audra, basically, to murder all of the retreat guests because she's too stupid to realize that the disease is like rabies, despite the fact that they say this in front of her. This is a blatant issue with the script. It is a blatant issue with the story, and honestly, breaks the immersion in the movie. This is a terrible writing decision. This is not anything to do with any of the actors. This is a terrible writing decision by Ashley O'Neil. Okay, subject of characters. None of the employees matter. None of them. They can all be replaced with each other, but the only exception being Jessie, who is the only one with medical training. But Aaron was able to get the harpoon out of Hayden's leg without medical training, so maybe Jessie really wasn't needed that much. Like, it really didn't matter. Their biggest personality trait is being fed up with Reese's cavalier business attitude. That's it. They have no personality separately. It just makes for a very flat experience when you don't have true character development. Eden went into the water to retrieve something corroded. I have no idea what that thing is, but wishful thinking tells me it's a part of Vince's four-wheeler from earlier. But I don't think they would have the time or the budget for that kind of continuity. Either way, you know the shark is out there. Why are you in the water? Stay out. You don't know there's a zombie takeover yet. Why are you in the water? You know that it's gonna be trouble. And it is trouble. Okay, this is annoying. There is foreshadowing, but it's horribly done. The shark magnets are foreshadowed but go nowhere. Absolutely nowhere. The phone cable is foreshadowed but has no weight on the plot. And then the saving grace of the movie, the flares, are mentioned once in a throwaway line. By the time that the climax rolls around, you've forgotten about them. I forgot about them. Oh, there are these flares. Yeah, it was mentioned once. The magnets? The magnets are mentioned like 8 or 9 times altogether. It just doesn't make any sense. It's a waste of foreshadowing technique. It comes completely out of left field. I do agree with the sentiment that if you're going to show it, you should always use it in your scene. But in this case, it would have been better just to leave it all out of the scene and just let the magnets be the star of the show. Maybe the magnets overload the shark's neurological system. You don't know. I think that would have been a much better way to go about it. Okay. Gotta get away from this because I'm getting angry about plots. Plot again. Zane. He starts out being kind of funny and likable, but at the end, he's nothing but a whiny, panicking buzzkill. Terrible character development, and then also, his zombification is terribly done. It happens much too quickly. Gabriella didn't turn for at least several hours after her bite, or her slash, whatever it was. It took Audra an even longer time to become a zombie, at least a 45-minute period. Zane turned way too fast, and it was absolutely meant just to shrink down the party to the final 3. It was really unnecessary. They could have made it so that Zane turned on the beach. Honestly, it would have made more sense to have Zane turning on the beach than Aaron. I don't know why they did this. Okay. This is my last note on this, and this is the biggest affront to me personally as a Jaws fan. The biggest affront in this entire movie is its last big line. Eden says in the last line of the climax,
Smile, you toxic son of a...
This is a blatant ripoff rather than an homage of Jaws' climactic final battle. It's iconic. It's an iconic line. In fact, I'm gonna insert the line here. Just listen, right here.
Smile, you son of a...
You've heard that, right? Yeah, that's because it was said by Ron Schneider in Jaws like 40 years ago. It's not an homage, it's a ripoff. It's blatant. Okay. Inhale, exhale, everyone. That one gets me a little hot under the collar because I'm such a huge Jaws fan, but it makes me physically angry. To say the least, obviously. Now that we're done with, kind of what I thought was done very poorly in the movie, let's go on to some other reviews by other people. Or, actually, right here would be a really good place to do an ad. Hold on just a second. Elevator music. Alright guys, so this is actually a really good place to talk about reviews that other people have. I think I mentioned earlier, the Toxic Shark averages a 3.3 out of 10 rating on IMDb, with some people calling it, on the reviews there, highly enjoyable killer shark effort. Okay. Others calling it some kind of toxic algebra, but don't call it a shark. Okay, I don't know what that meant, and they never explained it. The film also averages a 43% audience score in Rotten Tomatoes, with one film reviewer calling it Bachelor in Paradise, but with sharks and zombies. Yeah, that's probably the most accurate description of this movie. And another review of Toxic Shark on the website unobtainium13.com says of the film, "It may not be as bad as Fire Festival, but still." Personally, I couldn't agree more with them. Honestly, I think that all those things are fairly accurate. My favorite Amazon review of this reads as follows. "It was Shark Week on Sci-Fi, so I was able to get a massive dose of good, fun, icky bug. Toxic Shark was one I vaguely recall from sometime in the past, and it only took about 15 minutes in to realize I'd seen it before. No matter, I still had a good time going through some of the usual tropes. This movie is filmed with plenty of tits and ass, typical for a beach movie with a bunch of singles isolated on a tropical island for fun and sun, of course. You know what. The camera sure took advantage of that right until the mayhem started. Then there was the greedy owner of the resort who didn't want to call for help once things started going wrong. Add to that, the brainy hot chick who suspected things were awry and a hunk who was trying to make amends after initially freaking out on the ex-girlfriend happened to be said hot brainy chick. They didn't proofread this, did they? Neither did I, clearly. It all ended up to a lot of mindless fun with a high body count, plenty of plot holes, and you know what. It included cheesy acting from a bunch of unknowns that probably have starred in TV shows and movies I'd never watch. Doesn't matter because I had a great time and it ended with the inevitable what if, typical for this genre, which in itself is another trope to add to the list. This is what B-movies are all about, just with better color and CGI. Well, sort of. And yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I just wish that the plot holes had been a little smaller. Just a little smaller. But they're not normally this gaping and obvious. And clearly, the script was not edited by anybody competent. Probably the most famous review of this movie comes from one of my favorite YouTube channels, Bloodbath and Beyond. If you're interested, please go give them a watch. They're awesome and they're hilarious. Funnily enough, a lot of their final thoughts about the movie match mine pretty well. While the concept of the movie is fun, it never does enough to lean into its premise. There's very little makeup to make them look like a convincing zombie, and the shark effects are poor. Beyond that, their biggest issue with the movie is its characters, none of whom are very likable or interesting. Ultimately, they gave it 1 out of 5 stars. However, I'm a tad bit more forgiving. It's difficult to pinpoint my exact score for this movie. I can't deny that it has some pretty horrendous and obvious flaws that make me pretty angry at times, especially concerning the characters and the unfortunate special effects and the unfortunate pseudoscience that they put in. However, it was competently shot, and the soundtrack for a shark film was honestly pretty good. You gotta give it at least a star for each of those, maybe 1 star for the camera work and 3/4 of a star for the score, I don't know. Add in another 1.5 stars for the sheer amount of times that I doubled over laughing, and I think that the 3 out of 10 IMDb rating was more than fair, personally speaking. At least there aren't any stock videos of great white sharks, which is one of my pet peeves with these kind of movies, because when you do that, it's just lazy. At the very least, they took the time, or they kind of took the time to edit in a CGI shark and make sure that the kills for it looked realistic and wasn't just somebody floating on the top of the water and getting tugged down. That was very nice. That's my final thoughts on this movie. So my final score for this movie is a toxic sledge out of 10. So I'm hoping that you enjoyed this episode. This has been the So Below Average podcast, episode 1, Suffering and Spitting Venom. If you feel so inclined, please feel free to follow my Twitter page at SoBelowAverage1, that is SOBELOAVERAGE1 on Twitter. If you're listening on YouTube tonight, please feel free to subscribe, like, and share these videos so that I can reach more people who enjoy suffering. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you'll be informed of exactly when I add a new episode, which should be every other Wednesday. Today should be January 15th. of 2020. The next episode should be coming out the next Wednesday, and then after that I'll be on my normal schedule of every other week. If you have any suggestions for future episodes, I've got the first 2 months or so planned out so that I can kind of be up on what I'm doing. But once that period is over, I'd love to take suggestions for future episodes. So if you'd like to, please reach out to me at belowaverage19@gmail.com. Thank you guys so much for listening. I'm very, very lucky that I have a lot of people around me that have been very supportive in my decision to start this podcast. I appreciate all of you for everything you do to make this show happen and for encouraging me to try something new. I hope that anybody who does not know me who is listening, if you are listening, I don't know why you would be, I'd like to thank you for your time, and I hope that I will see you back next week for the next movie that we are doing. Alright guys, thank you so much for listening, and remember not to go anywhere near this movie. It is so below average.